Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Pat Fitzmaurice and by Joe Dolan of Fantasy Points. And Joe, Fitz was just reminding me before the show that you have a very exciting new gig starting soon.
Yeah, so I was a day one host when they launched SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio in 2010. It's hard to believe this is going to be the 15th season of that. But I've always been kind of a part-time host. I started on the weekends with Matt Camp, and since for the last 7 or 8 years, it's been just really the Sunday show, the game day show on SiriusXM, where Paul Kelly and I, after Matt left, Paul Kelly and I kind of react live to all the action, essentially your radio version, your fantasy radio version of the NFL Red Zone channel. And what that now is doing is it is parlayed into partially me taking over the morning show, which was a Guru in the Morning, Fantasy Football Morning. John Hansen, who I still work very closely with at Fantasy Points. John has hosted on the channel every day for over a decade. We used to be seasonal in the early days of fantasy sports radio, and then the morning show would become like the baseball show. Guys, I mean, I think we know football kind of pays the bills for a lot of sports talk here, but so the football show became a year-round show, and John, look, his kids just graduated high school. He now is an empty nester. He's moving to Georgia from New Jersey, and he just thought, this is time to step aside from the daily grind. And so I will be, I guess, a permanent rotational host on the morning show. Tom Brawley, who's also hosted there for the better part of over a year, is going to be taking some shifts. And I think you're going to see some other people from Fantasy Points as well on Fantasy Football Morning presented by Fantasy Points. It's a wonderful opportunity. But it's going to be a big change for me. I'm not a morning person, so I'm going to have to change that, obviously, because it's a morning show. But it's a big change and well-deserved for John, and I'm excited to get started with something that might become a little bit of my own here.
My dream growing up was to always do an afternoon drive sports talk radio show, because I am also not a morning person, so I can relate to that.
So John actually, when he started going daily, he was actually on in the afternoons, and that was Hansen's. He was the kind of mid-afternoon host, and then they moved him to the mornings. That's where he's been for a number of years, and that's where they're putting us. So yep, not a morning person. I don't eat breakfast. That's going to have to change. Probably work out a little bit in the morning. It's going to be a change, but it'll be one that that'll be hopefully fun, and hopefully people can enjoy it.
Fitz, do you have any big exciting life changes? I've been on vacation for 2 weeks. Did I come back to anything exciting for you too?
Nothing really new with me, Worm, but I am happy to hear the news that, Joe was telling me before the show that he's going to be on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That just so happens to be the 3 days we take our dog to daycare. So I'm in the car for a solid 35, 40 minutes on those days, and I'll get to hear Joe every morning. So that's good news.
That is perfect. Well, hopefully today's show goes well. In addition to your new show, Joe, again, congratulations on that. We're going to be talking about some breakout RB1s. We're looking at running backs who have not yet been RB1s in their career, but who have that elite upside that we think can get there for the first time in 2024. We're going to be looking on some potential rookies who can do that. I know it was a weaker rookie class at running back, but we still see some opportunity there, of course. Some sophomores that can do it, and then some veterans who we think have a chance to make the leap. Those are year 3 guys or beyond. At the position, all of our 2024 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. So if you want to kind of follow along, see where these guys are ranked, you can check them out there. Again, that's fantasypros.com/rankings. Let's jump right in, guys. We're going to start with the rookies. You guys picked one rookie each. Just a note for everybody, there have been 3 rookie running backs that have turned in an RB1 season across the last 3 seasons. So it does happen on average once a year. Joe, you are the guest, so let's start with you. Who's your rookie pick?
Yeah, so you let me pick my running backs first. I took the obvious sophomore running back, so I left Fitz the obvious rookie running back. I'm going to go with Trey Benson of the Arizona Cardinals. And look, the simplest argument here is this: James Conner has produced like an RB1 in the Arizona offense, but he misses games. And look, he's getting older. I believe this is going to be his 8th year in the NFL. So, and obviously he's dealt with injuries. He's never played a full season, and he's missed time in each of the last few seasons. And Trey Benson coming out of Florida State, very good elusiveness, one cut style. And I think it's going to be an outstanding fit in this Arizona offense. Look, James Conner is, of course, blocking the pathway for Trey Benson, but if Conner misses some time, Benson's going to have an opportunity to step in and produce like a number one running back in this offense if James Conner does miss time. Our guy Graham Barfield, who does yards created at Fantasy Points, he compared Trey Benson's running style to Travis Etienne. One cut, kind of elusive at the second level. He can catch the ball. He has great vision, and he's more of somebody who can create on the outside, on the perimeter, in an outside zone scheme. And I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to provide that fit for him. Obviously, this is contingent. This is contingent on James Conner being injured. This is contingent on James Conner maybe taking a step back. But we've seen James Conner produce in this offense. Kyler Murray adds that running dimension to the offense, which obviously will help the running back. If James Conner misses time, I wouldn't be shocked at all if we see Trey Benson put up top 12 weeks.
I love the fit of Benson in Arizona. I am really disappointed that I just through the quirk of where I was drafting and who I was drafting with, I got very little of Benson in my dynasty rookie drafts this year. It's not because I don't like the player or the fit primarily. I'm really excited about this one. I think it's, it's probably less likely that maybe that he finishes the season as, oh, he was a top 12 guy all year, but like by the end of the season, I think he will be ranked in the top 12 on a weekly basis in like November, December by the time we get there.
And week 14, it is, James Conner's got another foot injury. Trey Benson, I mean, you'll see him ranking in the top 5 on some projection sites. So I think if James Conner misses significant time, an overall top 12 running back season is in the cards for Trey Benson. And of course, he's in the last year of his contract. So next year, Trey Benson, we're going to be talking about like he's a 2nd or 3rd round pick, barring something bad going on. But that's the guy I went with because I like the player and I like the scheme fit and I like the opportunity to be the no doubt number 2 in this offense.
So Fitz took, obviously the running back that went higher that you referenced as the, the obvious guy. I would say before we get to the guy that Fitz took, I think that Benson is, when I look at 2025, I would honestly bet more on him being a consensus RB1 going into next season than the guy that Fitz took. I just like Benson that much and what that runway will look like once Conner's not there. Fitz, obviously, what do you think about Benson here before we get to your guy?
Yeah, such an appealing size and speed combination. And he's got some pass catching ability. And, as Joe mentioned, like it's probably a good way for a rookie running back to break in, like having a tag team partner in the backfield, but a tag team partner who's older and has some durability issues. So, yeah, there's clearly a path that, if Conner doesn't stay healthy, where we could see Benson crack RB1 territory.
And Fitz, I mean, there's no need to like hide it. People can surmise that you picked Jonathon Brooks here. But before you dive into Brooks, would you have considered Benson just given kind of the fit and everything we've said, or you would have gone with the obvious Brooks pick, even if he, if Benson was available?
I mean, I think I would have taken Brooks just because it's maybe a little less dependent on what happens with the guy ahead of him, the veterans. Like I think Brooks comes in as the RB1 with the Panthers, and I guess I'll just dive in. And I kind of wanted to go off the radar here and go with someone like Kamani Vidal or Ray Davis or something like that. But the more I looked at it, I thought Brooks was the best choice. And now, granted, this is going to depend on his health early in the year. He tore his ACL last November, and Dave Canellas, the new Panthers head coach, has already sort of warned us that he might not be ready for the start of training camp. So possible it's kind of a slow ramp up for Brooks early in the season. I think there's a little doubt that he's going to be getting less work in weeks like 1, 2, 3, 4 than he is in weeks 10, 11, 12, 13. But consider for a moment that even though Brooks did tear his ACL in November, he was the first running back selected in this draft, and he went 20 picks ahead of Trey Benson. And I don't think it's too hard to believe that once Brooks is deemed fit, the Panthers are going to want to give him the featured role, and is significantly more work than Chuba Hubbard or Miles Sanders. And this is, a really good prospect, just fast, agile, runs with some power, catches passes, really hard to bring down. So like little doubt about what kind of a prospect he is, just a matter of how soon he's able to handle a full load. And, by the way, Dave Canales gave Rachaad White a huge amount of work last year in Tampa. Like Rachaad White had 272 carries, just 8 behind league leader Derrick Henry. So there's certainly a path to RB1 status for Brooks if he makes a smooth return from the knee injury.
Joe, what was your evaluation on Brooks coming into, the NFL, and obviously based on the landing spot now?
Yeah, I obviously thought that Jonathon Brooks was the best running back in this class after going back and really evaluating it. And I think the fact that he was the only running back taken in the second round, despite the injury, shows just how highly the NFL thought of him. Like, this is a guy that probably might have, I'm going to say without the injury, might have been in the mix to be a back end of the first round kind of guy. Remember, NFL teams, even in this running backs don't matter era, they only have so many first round grades. So it isn't even uncommon to see running backs sneak into the back end of the first round because teams by that point they might have their first round grades exhausted and they just want to go for the best player on their board. He's got extremely quick feet. His passing, I think he does have passing chops, but a lot of running backs in college don't catch a whole lot of passes just because of the way college offenses are designed. And listen to this stat that Graham Barfield dug up. Since 2013, 27 running backs were selected in round 2 and played in at least 4 games in their first year. 12 of those 27 running backs selected in round 2 finished as top 24 running backs on the season. So basically a coin flip chance that Jonathon Brooks, of course, provided he's healthy, is going to provide you a weekly start worthy running back. And with the landing spot, the fact that Miles Sanders was a disaster last year, Chuba Hubbard being just a guy, Jonathon Brooks is the easy pick for the top rookie running back in this class. I just wanted to tee up Fitz and give him a little bit of an easy one here to lead off the show.
Appreciate that, Joe.
If these guys weren't available, and these were the first 2 running backs taken in most dynasty rookie drafts, I mean, you could maybe make the case like, well, all Blake Corum needs is a Kyren Williams injury, and the way Sean McVay uses running backs, you can make the case there. But were there other rookies that you considered, Joe? I mean, I know Fitz mentioned like Kamani Vidal and some other guys. Was there anybody that if these 2 weren't available, if we had gone more than just one player each, that you would have thought about?
The one that was really interesting to me was Marshawn Lloyd. Watched him at the Senior Bowl down in Mobile. I call him an R1, L1 guy, that the juke. I think I haven't played Madden in years. I'm picking back up football video games with the college football game. Back when I last played those, you juked with the R1 and the L1. I think you might use the juke stick now. I'm not sure. But anyway, Marshawn Lloyd's a juke stick kind of guy. And we know that Matt LaFleur likes to rotate his running backs. He's already been talking up Marshawn Lloyd. And if he could fill like the Aaron Jones role to Josh Jacobs' A.J. Dillon role, I thought there was an opportunity there for him. But Josh Jacobs being there is a bit of a damper on him being a number 1. But that being said, I love Marshawn Lloyd's landing spot. He's actually been my most drafted rookie running back so far. Actually, I take that back. He's my second most drafted rookie running back in best ball behind Tyrone Tracy of the Giants. But Tracy's going a lot later in drafts, and that's why I have more of him.
The last time I played Madden, I wasn't the juke stick, it was the truck stick, which I guess would be more of like an Audric Estime type guy you would use that with. But yeah, I remember having fun with that one. Fitz, I know you just quickly mentioned some rookies. Was there anybody else you wanted to at least throw out their name or?
Yeah, I mean, barring injury, like I feel like Vidal is one of the few guys who could get there without some sort of injury because he's got, the very one-dimensional Gus Edwards in front of him and the very oft injured J.K. Dobbins. For guys like Lloyd and Jalen Wright, a lot of talent, but I think it would take one or more injuries ahead of those guys for them to be in RB1 territory. And that's probably the case with most of the guys in this class. Tyrone Tracy is really interesting, though, because there aren't many guys with a more direct route to lead back status, I think. He's really just got Devin Singletary ahead of him. Hopefully he can beat out Eric Gray, but, Thor Nystrom was really high on Tyrone Tracy, and with good reason. Like, he's a freaky athlete, former wide receiver. A lot of the same reasons we used to like or get excited about Antonio Gibson are the reasons we like Tyrone Tracy as a prospect.
We are just over a month away from training camps, so it's time to start looking ahead to the NFL season with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Get a jump start on the season with futures bets on division winners, win totals, stat leaders, and so much more. Explore the latest odds and check out futures for your favorite teams and players on the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Some futures I'm looking at right now are division winner odds. The three biggest favorites on DraftKings right now are the Chiefs at minus 230, the Niners at minus 195, the Falcons at minus 115. Those are actually the only three with minus odds. There are a lot of intriguing teams getting plus money to win their divisions this year. The Colts at plus 310, the Bears at plus 265, and the Packers at plus 210 in the same division. Also in the AFC North, the Ravens at plus 130. I like, obviously, and the Steelers at plus 850, I think, are interesting as well. However you plan to bet your NFL futures, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's code FantasyPros only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, guys, let's move to the second-year players here and a quick nugget on these guys. There have been 6 sophomore running backs that have broken out with their first RB1 seasons over the last 2 years alone. That's more than half the total number of running backs who have hit RB1 status for the first time in that span. So of the guys who have become an RB1 for the first time in the last 2 years, over half of them did it in their second season in the NFL. 5 of them came just last year. So it is definitely a demographic you want to be looking at if you're trying to find that breakout guy. Joe, we'll start with you again. Who is your first running back here?
Oh, yeah. So I told Fitz I was going to tee him up, give him the easy one with Jonathon Brooks, because I'm taking the easy one here. It's Bijan Robinson. Yes, Bijan Robinson was healthy last year, and nonetheless, he averaged 14.7 fantasy points per game. That was RB16 on the season, so he did not qualify as an RB1. Thank you, Arthur Smith. So let's go to some of the comments right now. Bijan Robinson told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution during during mini camps that he expects to have more of a Christian McCaffrey role within the offense in Zach Robinson's system. Quote, I'm going to be more of a runner that does everything else. It's like run first, like what I did in college, and then still having access to go to receiver, still have access to do creative things out of the backfield. He actually led all running backs with 398 routes last year, believe it or not, and finished behind only Christian McCaffrey in route share, but he averaged just 12.6 carries per game to 10.9 for Tyler Algier. I anticipate that Bijan Robinson is going to usurp a significantly bigger portion of that backfield. Guys, that's why he's being drafted as a first-round pick, because the world expects that to happen. I think Zach Robinson will make Bijan the prince who was promised, unlike Arthur Smith.
Yeah, this is as easy a selection as there is to make in today's episode. He's already, obviously, as you referenced, not only being drafted as a top 12 running back, but as a top 12 pick, as a top 8 pick in drafts already. So the path is very clear here. Everybody knows the talent. He's still young. Obviously, we're really excited about the coaching changes. Fitz, clearly you would have selected Bijan if he was available.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a breakaway layup for Joe. So, no disputing this one. I think he's pretty much RB2 or RB3 on everyone's draft board.
Joe, do you have him 2 or 3? Is he ahead of Breece Hall for you or behind him?
Scott Barrett has made a very compelling case for Breece Hall. I have them as basically 2A and 2B. I have Bijan slightly higher on my board. I've actually drafted Hall more, though, because Hall falls to the back half of underdog drafts more frequently than Bijan does. And at the top of underdog drafts, and this is just a strategy thing that I've been doing in underdog, and best ball is what I've been doing the most of at this point time of year, obviously. I've found that on those particular drafts, the running backs in round 2 are way more appealing than the wide receivers in round 2. Meanwhile, I view the wide receivers in round 3 as being pretty similarly tiered as the wide receivers in round 2. So what I've been doing a lot is kind of in the middle. I'm taking CMC at 1, but I'll take my CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase or Amon-Ra, AJ Brown, whichever one you want of those receivers in round 1. And then coming back, you have access to Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and I think somebody Pat's going to talk about very briefly here, DeVon Achane. You have access to those guys in round 2, And I like those builds more than taking a running back in round 1, because I am so much higher on the wide receivers that are going in round 1 on average than I am the wide receivers who are going on round 2 in average. So you might disagree with that, but that's kind of the appeal that I've had. But I've drafted Breece Hall more because he falls to the back half of the first round more than Bijan. And when Bijan gets drafted, that's when I can get a Jamar Chase or an Amon-Ra on my team. And I've been kind of leaning in that direction a little bit more.
Fitz, we'll transition into your DeVon Achane pick in a second. Just very quickly, are you taking Bijan ahead of any of those receivers when you're sitting down to draft, Fitz? Any of that, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown, whichever receiver kind of falls to the middle of the first? Are you taking Bijan over any of them, or are you just taking the wide receiver?
Yeah, I'm taking him over some of them, including Justin Jefferson, just because I really like the top tier of running backs, and I quickly lose confidence in the RBs after about the top 4 or 5. Top 4, actually. And I wouldn't even include Jahmyr Gibbs in that list. I like
So
getting one of the. I
you
mean,
don't like.
Gibbs.
Sorry.
No, go. I was just going to say, like, Gibbs, after he and Montgomery were both totally healthy last year, when Montgomery came back, like from week 10 or whatever it was, down through the end of the playoffs, including their playoff games, Gibbs averaged 14 touches a game. Like, I just don't think that's first round material. And, even though I'm about to make the case for a running back who has a very similar workload, but, you can get DeVon Achane a lot later than you can get Jahmyr Gibbs in drafts, at least like a full round later, typically.
I know I didn't want to derail the conversation, but you're not in on JT and Saquon in round 2? Fitz?
Oh, I'm totally in on JT.
Yeah.
I would rather have JT than Jahmyr Gibbs.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Fitz, you kind of called yourself out in the way I was going to about saying like having a problem with Gibbs's volume and then making a case for Achane. But you've been on the Achane train for the entire offseason. We've had multiple conversations with some of our other analysts who have disagreed with you on that. So I was not surprised to see you pick him here.
The last 2 off seasons, Worm,
Yes.
if I might add, that I liked him a lot coming out of A&M. Yeah, and look, we know DeVon Achane isn't getting 20 touches a game, but like we should also dispense with this foolish notion that Jalen Wright is going to somehow kneecap Achane and significantly reduce his workload. Like, we have no idea whether Jalen Wright is going to be a decent NFL running back. We've already seen DeVon Achane be an extraordinary NFL running back. I mean, a guy with 4.32 speed, who was a sprinter in college at Texas A&M, has outstanding contact balance, totally reminiscent of Warwick Dunn. So even though he's a smaller back, he's not easy to bring down. Achane averaged 7.8 yards per carry last year on more than 100 carries. And get this, I mean, per Next Gen Stats, Achane led the league in rushing yards over expected per attempt at 2.87. Second place was Christian McCaffrey at 1.32. DeVon Achane more than doubled the next closest pursuer in terms of rushing yards over expected. Had the highest success rates in the league on his rushing attempts. Achane is just this special player, and if all he needs to do, I think all he needs to do to finish RB1 this year is just stay healthy. Even if he's only getting those 13 or 14 touches a game, he's that explosive. He's going to have that many smash plays. I mean, I really think that he will finish RB1 if he plays 17 games or in RB1 range, not the RB1.
Joe, you mentioned Achane as one of those guys when discussing your builds, as second round option. So I assume you're on board with Fitz here.
Yeah, I'm on board with him. The closest kind of analog we have for a rookie season of somebody who's that hyper efficient, and Achane was more hyper efficient than just about anybody in recent years, is probably Alvin Kamara. And Kamara did dip in efficiency from his rookie season to his second season. But here's the difference. Alvin Kamara received a 42% workload increase in his second season. So they traded off a little bit of that efficiency for a greater workload to try to tap into more big plays. And I think that's probably what's coming for Achane. The problem is here for Achane that makes him a little bit of a boomer bust pick is, of course, the fact that Raheem Mostert is there. And Raheem Mostert was the RB1 until his yearly injury unfortunately happened during the fantasy playoffs. And then, of course, the Dolphins went out and got Jalen Wright. just because they're addicted to big, fast guys. And I don't know if Jalen Wright, our guy Brett Whitefield, who did our prospect guide, said, yeah, he's really fast, but he runs like he's wearing a blindfold. But the Dolphins certainly believe in his size and speed profile, but I just wonder if that's more of a Mostert replacement. So I am in on DeVon Achane. I think he's going to get a workload increase this year that will justify his ADP.
Now, Joe, you knew when you took Bijan that you were taking somebody that Fitz would have wanted to take. I don't know if you knew you were also doing that with Chase Brown, who's your next pick here,
I
but
did not.
I'm sure Fitz's heart broke when he saw that Chase Brown was already taken.
Yeah, so I left a couple more obvious ones for Fitz, who he's going to talk about, both of whom I also considered. But Chase Brown here, and I'm going to tie this into one of my veterans who I think has an opportunity to finish as an RB1 for the first time in his career. But here's the deal with Chase Brown. Like, I wonder if Zach Moss and Chase Brown are arbitrage Jalen Warren and Najee Harris. Just like one guy's considered to be the more of the runner and the other guy is considered to be the more explosive receiver. Here is what Zach Taylor has said about Chase Brown this offseason. That's exciting to see a guy that you can just make a small comment to, and 4 months later it comes back and you can tell he's really emphasized that this is about how he's been working on catching the ball. I think that's everything we knew about Chase. That's everything we thought we had with Chase, a guy that's going to continue to grow and understand what the role entails as a running back in this league. And the more downs you can put yourself on the field, the better. So they're talking about him as a third down back. Now, one of the things he struggled with last year was pass protection. He actually ended up playing more special team snaps than he did offensive snaps. So this is a projection here for Chase Brown, but he's explosive. We saw that at the end of last year, making big plays. I think everybody remembers that short pass that he took to the house down the right sideline. And look, at his current cost, he's a double-digit round pick. That's a pretty easy button for me to click with Chase Brown.
Obviously, Fitz, there's no need to sell you on this. You're several spots higher than consensus on Brown, and he's somebody you've also talked about a lot.
Yeah, and I'll just mention the stat I've already mentioned 713 times on this show that in his final season at Illinois, Chase Brown averaged 27.3 carries a game. So, like, if anything were to happen to Zach Moss, if he were to get hurt, or if he was just ineffective, and the Bengals just wanted to give Chase Brown that Joe Mixon role, like, Chase Brown could absolutely handle it. Like, Brett Bielema ran that guy into the ground in Chase Brown's final year with the Illini. So, like, he could handle a big load if he needed to.
I don't know if you see me shaking my head here. It's nothing about what you're saying, Fitz, and that I'm disagreeing. But if you could see over my left shoulder here to your right, that's a Penn State Nittany Lions kind of banner. I'm a Penn State grad. I don't know if you remember that god awful game in Chase Brown's final year at Illinois. He had about 74 carries, and he averaged like 4.5 yards a carry. And Penn State and Illinois went to like 8 overtimes. They had the 2-point conversion shootout. It was that game. I heard Chase Brown's name enough in that game for a lifetime. So I just want you to know the fact that I'm bringing him up on the show means I certainly believe in him.
Yeah,
God, that game was awful.
Chase Brown trampled my Wisconsin Badgers that year too, Joe, in Madison. So yeah, that was a painful Chase Brown year for both of us.
Yeah, I didn't realize we had 3 Big Ten guys on the podcast. My unfortunate memory is of Penn State playing Maryland, where I went, and Jahan Dotson just absolutely torching the Terps secondary right and left for like the entire game, and I was in the building for that. And
my Maryland in the Big Ten memory is Stephon Diggs starting a fight with Penn State's players before the game. That's my Maryland Penn State.
That's one of my favorite Big Ten memories,
for sure.
All right, let's go to the next player here from you, Fitz.
Tyjae Spears, and it's sort of fitting that Joe should be here for conversation about Spears, since some of the best pro Spears arguments I've seen have come from Joe's outfit, FantasyPoints.com. For instance, the Fantasy Points data suite tells us that Tyjae Spears had an 11.8% first read target rate last year, second only to Christian McCaffrey, who was just a 1/10 of a percentage point higher. And Joe's colleague Ryan Heath recently posted this little nugget on all downs other than first downs. And obviously, Tyjae Spears wasn't playing on a lot of first downs on Derrick Henry's team last year. Spears led all running backs with an 18.4% target share excluding first down. So Spears is already close to like an elite pass catching back, and he showed some juice as a runner last year. 4.5 yards per carry, 44% success rate, which is actually really good for running back. 30.3 breakaway run percentage, which put him top 15 among backs with at least 50 carries. So some good early stuff from Tyjae Spears in his rookie year. Had 838 yards from scrimmage, even with Derrick Henry leading the league in rushing attempts. So now Spears is sharing work with Tony Pollard instead of Derrick Henry. I mean, Pollard has been a good NFL running back. We really didn't see it last year. Maybe that was because of the injury, the broken foot he had at the end of the 2022 season that probably lingered into 2023. But there's definitely room for growth in Spears' workload this year. And if Pollard were to get hurt again, or if just, continue to have sort of diminished effectiveness, Spears could maybe eventually sneak into the lead role.
What do you make of Spears, Joe?
I think it's a phenomenal pick where he's going. I'm kind of, once again, when we're doing best ball drafts, we kind of have to, and you're doing the high volume that I'm doing, you kind of have to admit what you don't know, and that sometimes means you don't draw a solid line between two guys on the same team, right? I like Najee Harris and Jalen Warren both at ADP. I've been drafting Tony Pollard at if he falls below ADP, but I like Tyjae Spears a little bit more than his ADP. The question is for Spears. Well, what was it? I think he doesn't have an ACL in one of his knees, or he's got that. And you wonder if that's something that like kind of Jay Ajayi ish. You try to use him on his first contract, and then we'll see what happens. If you get anything beyond that, then great. If not, well, we used him on his first contract. I'm in on Spears this year. I think he's got a good opportunity. I like the new offense, and I like the fact that this is clearly going to be more of a pass-heavy offense. I like how that's going to lean into Tyjae Spears' skill set.
Joe, let's go to you for your last second-year player.
Yeah, I tried to go a little bit off the board for this one. I went with Jaleel McLaughlin of the Denver Broncos, and this is one where we're going to have to pay attention to camp reports like crazy. We had the conflicting reports. I think Cecil Lammey was out there at Broncos camp, and he mentioned, and Sigmund Bloom tweeted this out, Javonte Williams might not even make the team. And then I think there were Bronco beat writers who were like, he's going to make the team. But we do know Javonte Williams was very inefficient last year, coming off a horrific knee injury. And that pains me to say, because Javonte Williams was one of my favorite prospects at the running back position in years. I drafted him a metric ton 2 years ago, before he went down with the knee injury. Then we watched Nate Hackett stupidly have him in a rotation with fumbling Mel Gordon. And then they cut Melvin Gordon after Javonte got hurt. So we didn't get the opportunity to see what Javonte could do really as a true bell cow. Then last year, talking to Edwin Porras, our injury expert, I was like, there's no way I'm drafting Javonte. And then this year, at RB31, I'm not in on Javonte either. I can't get over the fact that how he looked last year. And I can't get over the fact that Jaleel McLaughlin as a rookie averaged 1.98 yards per route run, which was fourth best among running backs. And Sean Payton has gotten elite production out of guys like Reggie Bush, Darren Sproles, and Alvin Kamara in his career. I know McLaughlin's a little bit smaller than that, but this is the NCAA's all-time leading rusher from Youngstown State. Go Penguins. And Javonte Williams struggled last year. And we're looking at Broncos camp reports. We're like, man, Jaleel McLaughlin could have a role here. The thing that gives me the most pause is the sheer number of running backs who are here. Obviously, Javonte Williams. They still have Samaje Perine, who's a coach's pet because he can block and he can catch. They also drafted Audric Estime, and they signed Blake Watson, who I thought was a draftable prospect. But Jaleel McLaughlin at RB52 is a pretty easy button click for me right now.
Fitz, you are not Debro, who, if he was on this show, would be so just in agreement with Joe. Joe, I don't know if you know this. Debro has McLaughlin. I believe at one point he had him as a top 24 running back. I think that's dropped a little.
Wow.
He's still in the 24 to 30 range. He's very, very high on him this year. Fitz, do you want to try and stand in for Debro here and agree, or are you going to go against Joe?
Yeah, no, optimally, I would be able to tag in Debro for like the next 2 minutes so he could just wax poetically about Jaleel McLaughlin. But I'm pro McLaughlin too. I agree with Joe. He's just a great value where he's going right now. Considering what he showed, the path to RB1 for him might be a little cluttered just because, as Joe mentioned, there's so many other guys in that backfield, or well, you mentioned it, Worm. And Blake Watson, for instance, I think they gave like one of the highest UDFA signing bonuses there was. So it's really confusing with Estime and all these guys now. Like it's going to be a backfield by committee, but that's kind of always the way Sean Payton has operated. But at the same time, Sean Payton has always managed to wring like fantasy relevant seasons out of 2 or 3 backs. We saw that in New Orleans for a long time. So yeah, with what Jaleel McLaughlin showed last year, he's really intriguing for sure. And I definitely want to get my fair share of him in drafts this year.
Fitz, the last second year guy you want to talk about is somebody that Erickson is very big on. So all the Fantasy Pros analysts are getting their shout outs today. Who you got for the last second year player?
It's Kendre Miller, and maybe it's a little bit of a stretch because it might take an injury or some sort of contractual dispute, but like we might have something like that happen this year. Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams are both going into their age 29 seasons. Williams looked pretty cooked last year, 2.9 yards per carry. Kamara skipped the final day of minicamp because he reportedly wants a new deal. The Saints, not surprisingly, do not have a lot of wiggle room under the cap. That's just kind of how the Saints roll. So, like, if they trade him or if there's some sort of Kamara holdout, that is a way for Kendre Miller to get his foot in the door. And I would imagine the Saints wouldn't mind having a lead back who's playing on a rookie contract. Miller's rookie year was kind of derailed by injuries. He sprained his MCL in the preseason, missed the first couple of games. Then he had an ankle injury later in the year. Only played 8 games as a rookie. And there were only 2 games where he had double-digit carries. Once against a very good New England run defense, had 12 carries for 37 yards, but also had 4 receptions for 53 yards. And then in week 18, the Saints just kind of turned him loose, and he had 13 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown against the Falcons. So we don't know what Kendre Miller is going to be in the NFL yet, but good size and speed, was really productive at TCU, and the Saints spent pretty significant draft capital on him. He was an early 3rd-round pick in 2023. So intriguing for sure. Like it would take a couple of dominoes to fall for him to be in a position to have an RB1 season, but stranger things have happened.
What do you make of Miller, Joe?
So here's a conversation I had just today. Actually, I talked to Ross Jackson, who hosts the Locked On Saints podcast. He does great work with the Locked On Network. I talked to him for our Fantasy Franchise Focus series, and he thinks Kamara is going to get a deal done. So what his thought was is Alvin Kamara really, he has a number of years left on his contract, but the Saints have a bunch of void years in there, as they always do, and he has no guarantees for 2025. He thinks the Saints showing some good faith and pushing some of that guaranteed money or adding some guaranteed money to 2025 will be enough to get Alvin Kamara in camp. So he thinks something's going to get done there, but that doesn't change the fact that Alvin Kamara is entering his age 29 season and is coming off the least efficient season of his career. And Jamal Williams, as Fitz mentioned, they had him playing some fullback last year, never really hit his stride. I think Kendre Miller is a great bet here because if Kamara suffers some injuries or this contract dispute does go sour, they like his size, they like his vision. That's why they made him a 3rd-round pick. I think he's got a good opportunity.
Quick note on FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship drafts. They are already live, both fast and slow. It's a $350 entry fee. You can go to fantasypros.com/FFPC and use promo code FantasyPros on sign up to get $25 off your first entry. It's a $1 million first place prize. It's the world's largest online season-long tournament. Again, that's fantasypros.com/FFPC. All right, guys, let's get into the veterans here. And again, these are just running backs who are in year 3 or beyond. That's how we're categorizing it. In the last 3 years, there have been 4 running backs in year 3 or later to break out as RB1s for the first time. That was Cordero Patterson in 2021, Tony Pollard in 2022, Jamal Williams in 2022, and Raheem Mostert in 2023. Joe, we'll start with you here.
So this is a scheme fit, and I'm going to tie it to my Chase Brown because I think there is an opportunity that there's a number one running back coming from this backfield, and fantasy drafters have put Zach Moss above Chase Brown in early drafts. Here is a great stat from Fantasy Points data of the most running back carries from shotgun in 11 personnel last year were the Colts and the Bengals. 233 for the Colts. The Bengals had 188. Yards per carry from shotgun in 11 personnel. Jonathan Taylor had 5.24, Zach Moss had 5.20, and Joe Mixon had 4.59. So, I mean, those are all really good yards per carry numbers, but Zach Moss was significantly better than Joe Mixon in that regard. It's possible Zach Moss is simply a better scheme fit than Joe Mixon for what the Bengals want to do. And as we know, Joe Burrow loves the shotgun almost to a fault. So they're going to run out of shotgun quite a bit. I think Zach Moss is going to be the early down running back here. And if Chase Brown doesn't improve in pass protection, then sometimes, he's, even if he's a great receiver, won't be on the field in third downs. Zach Moss profiles as the guy who's going to get the more touchdown looks at the goal line. Joe Mixon has been a touchdown scoring machine at times in the Joe Burrow era with the Cincinnati Bengals. As a matter of fact, last year, Joe Mixon had 12 touchdowns, 9 rushing, 3 receiving. 2 years ago in 2021, when Joe Mixon made the Pro Bowl, he had 13 rushing touchdowns and 3 receiving. Double-digit touchdowns are well within the range of outcomes for Zach Moss this season. Oh, and by the way, we've actually seen him produce as a running back one for a short period of time when Jonathan Taylor was not a full-time player last year, as he had the contract dispute and before he got ramped up for the Colts. So Zach Moss is, I think he's a fair bet at his current ADP. Again, I like both Bengal running backs at ADP.
Now, Fitz did agree on Chase Brown based on the conversations we've had all offseason. I'm guessing he doesn't agree.
Lay it on me, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, as much as I'd like to tease Joe for being a fence straddler here, you do have to at least acknowledge the possibility that Moss is going to get the vast majority of the early down work for the Bengals this season. And like that stat about shotgun and 11 personnel is really interesting. I do sort of wonder if maybe Moss didn't benefit from playing with Anthony Richardson early last year because Richardson was healthy basically for most of that thing. And we know that mobile quarterbacks really like give a turbo boost to the efficiency of their running backs. And, Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson never got to play together last year. It was kind of Moss benefiting from that early season dose of Richardson, and not always, because Richardson did miss some time even within that short period of time. But from week 6 on, Moss averaged 3.6 yards per carry. That's where I kind of wonder whether he is, um, you know, whether he's the real deal and whether he can dominate the early season work for the Bengals. It's been kind of a mixed bag with Zach Moss through the early part of his career, and I still don't know quite what to make of him.
I talked about this on a show earlier this week, actually, how, when I enter draft season, there's always a couple of situations that I feel like are really key. Like if you answer this question correctly, you are giving yourself a very good chance of, setting yourself up for a championship run. Like one of those situations where the managers who solve this before draft day that I think applies to that is the Texans receiving core. Which guy is the right guy to target there and who kind of elevates as the alpha, if there is one that does so, I think will be really important. To me, the Bengals backfield also falls under that category. If you correctly identify one of these guys who does really kind of take control of the backfield, knowing what we've seen out of Joe Mixon, even as he maybe declined a bit in terms of his efficiency and just his skill level and athleticism, if one of these guys can kind of step into that role in what could be a very good offense if Burrow is healthy again, then I think it's a really important question to get right. And I don't feel confident yet that I have the answer. I'm definitely closer to Joe in that I'm kind of happy to just take swings on both guys here and just try and make sure I have a piece of this backfield in some degree. Let's go to the next veteran here, Fitz. And this is somebody that I was surprised hasn't been an RB1 yet just because of how talented he is.
Yeah, Kenneth Walker. I mean, he's finished as a mid-range RB2 in each of his first 2 seasons in the league. So it's not that far-fetched to think he could have an RB1 finish this year. Since Kenneth Walker entered the league in 2022, no NFL running back has forced more missed tackles. And Walker's even missed 4 games since coming into the league and still ranks first in missed tackles for. So he's fast. He's athletic. He's shifty. Basically, everything he was billed as coming into the NFL after rushing for 1,600 yards and 19 touchdowns at Michigan State in his final college season. And there were some people who liked him as much, if not more, than Breece Hall when he came into the league that year. Walker has so far averaged just under 80 yards from scrimmage a game and has scored 9 touchdowns in each of his first 2 NFL seasons. I think one of the reasons people are a little bit nervous about drafting Kenneth Walker is that Zach Charbonnet is there. Seattle spent second round draft capital on Charbonnet, but last year Walker averaged, in games that they played together, Kenneth Walker averaged 15.7 touches a game and Zach Charbonnet averaged 7.4. So I feel like the pecking order has pretty clearly been established here. I've also heard people express concerns that the Seahawks might be a little more pass heavy with Ryan Grubb coming in from the University of Washington to run the offense and call the plays. But Seattle passed at the 5th highest rate last year. So I don't know how much more pass heavy they could be. I really like Walker at his 5th round ADP, and I think he has a good chance to have an RB1 season.
Joe, where do you rank Walker this season?
I have him pretty much right at his ADP. The thing about Walker is, and Fitz hit on the new coaching staff. How are they going to feel about him? I think the Zach Charbonnet pick last year, as we learned, and it scared a lot of us off of Kenneth Walker, much like the Tank Bigsby pick, erroneously scared us off of Travis Etienne. One of the things about the Zach Charbonnet pick last year that became evident was Pete Carroll was essentially like, yeah, that situation where I had to play DJ Dallas on a severely sprained ankle because we didn't have any other running backs. Yeah, that's never happening to me again because I like to run the football. Now, the thing about Kenneth Walker is he could probably drive some coaches nuts because of his style. Always looking for the home run. Are the Seahawks going to lean into that? Or are they going to default more to, hey, Zach Charbonnet, if 5 yards are blocked, he's getting them and he's going to finish his run? I don't know how that new coaching staff is going to react. So that's why I have Kenneth Walker, who I think is one of the most gifted backs naturally in the league, kind of at his ADP. I'm fine taking him there. I'm fine passing on him there, depending on what kind of build my team has going.
Joe did a good job of pointing that out. One of my friends calls Kenneth Walker a Lewis and Clark guy. He is east-west too often and not enough north-south.
That's a good
Greg
one.
Cosell compared him to a jazz musician when he was coming out of Michigan State. He like as just somebody who's going to be constantly playing and experimenting around the beat and and oftentimes will come up with something very pleasing, but it takes a little bit of experimentation to do that. And I thought that was a good comparison.
Joe, let's go to your last veteran here.
Yeah, so this is one who people are actually drafting as if he's going to finish as an RB1 this year, and I think it's completely justified. It's Isiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. Isiah Pacheco is currently carrying on Underdog a 4th round ADP of running back 12. Over his last 9 games last year, including the playoffs, Pacheco averaged 16.9 fantasy points per game, would have been 4th among running backs. He averaged 2/3 of the team's rush attempt share. But here is the stat that's really intriguing to me. In 4 games last year with Jerick McKinnon out of the lineup, Isiah Pacheco averaged 19.7 half-point PPR fantasy points per game and a 14.9% target share. That would have been 5th best among running backs. So they did not treat him as merely an early down grinder in that backfield. He was actually getting check downs and screen passes. Now, the Chiefs clearly this offseason signing Hollywood Brown and drafting Xavier Worthy, they want to add that vertical element back to their offense. But they also did nothing in the backfield. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is back. And I think this is lining up for Isiah Pacheco to be a true bell cow. And I think one of the appeals of going like kind of receiver to start is Isiah Pacheco can be sitting there in the 3rd or 4th round for you to draft. And I think you can get a legitimate bell cow there. That's one of my favorite picks to make thus far. And I haven't been a Pacheco guy to this point in my career in the fantasy industry, but I am this year. I'm in on Isiah Pacheco.
You might be in on Isiah Pacheco. You are not the guest we've had on this week who is highest on him, because we had Andy Behrens on Tuesday's show. He has Pacheco RB4 this season, which
Wow.
if you look on Fantasy Pros, you can see where each analyst has, if you click on a player, you can go to their expert ranks. Andy is highest. No one else is higher than RB6, and he's got him up at RB4.
Yeah.
So a couple of guests on the show this week for the listeners, really praising Pacheco.
Let me look at his ADP really quick and just figure out who I have, because I certainly have him above players who are getting drafted before him. I like him more than Travis Etienne. I think I like him a little bit more than Derrick Henry. I cannot go as high as Andy is on. I like him more than Josh Jacobs, and I like him more than James Cook. Um, the Kyren Williams debate is for another show. I don't think I have him above Kyren here. I'm one of those guys who's buying the dip on Kyren, but I think I'm very, very happy with Pacheco this year. And if he's my running back one, I will not bat an eye. I think he can absolutely pay off as your RB1.
I've been similar to you historically in that I just haven't really been a Pacheco guy in the last couple of years, but I think like what we saw towards the end of last year, like obviously, and the case that you laid out, the case Andy laid out earlier this week, I think is really compelling. And I think he's somebody that I am now at the point where I'm totally with you. If he's my RB1, I am not sweating that in the slightest. Fitz, where do you come down on Pacheco?
Yeah, I've got Pacheco as a low end RB1 too, and I think he might be safer than Kyren Williams. There is just so little competition for him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire and what Deneric Prince, and oh, by the way, like he's probably going to be running against lighter boxes this year now that the Chiefs have added Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown. So there's a lot to like here. Like the only thing that scares me about him is his running style. Like he can be a little reckless. He runs like the Tasmanian devil. So I do worry about his durability, but the role, he was a big offseason winner. I mean, the Chiefs just added nothing at running back, and he is primed for a lot of work.
One last veteran here, Fitz, who you got?
Brian Robinson, and now I feel like we're just outright pandering to Derek Brown here with this. And I'm even going to steal some of Derek Brown's points on him. Like this year does set up really nicely for Brian Robinson Jr. We know that mobile quarterbacks, as we've talked about with Anthony Richardson and Zach Moss in the early part of last year, mobile quarterbacks often spike the efficiency of their running backs. And the setup in Washington is eerily similar to the setup in Washington in 2012 when Robert Griffin III had that electrifying rookie season and Alfred Morris had a ton of rushing yards, 1,600 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns. So also, for as much grief as people gave Cliff Kingsbury when he was the head coach in Arizona, like the fact that he's the OC in Washington bodes really well, I think, for the fantasy value of some of the guys in that offense, and especially for the running game, because the Cardinals operated at the second fastest situation neutral pace in the league the first 3 years of Kingsbury's tenure with the Cardinals. And they were also eighth in red zone rushing rate over those 3 seasons. So Austin Eckler is kind of a wild card in the backfield, but I think at worst, Robinson is going to get a 50% share in this backfield because Eckler looked pretty cooked last year. And he has flat out said he does not want to get 300 touches a season anymore. Like, I think he wants part-time duty. So if Robinson is the lead back this year for Washington, like he's going to have a really high ceiling in that offense, I believe, and certainly will have RB1 upside.
Joe, what do you think of that comparison of RG3, Alfred Morris with Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson?
I mean, I think it fits to a T. I do want to expand this into another point. Chris Wecht, who does our projections over at the site, he was like, he's pretty much higher on Jaden Daniels than just about anybody in the industry. And he said the rationale is like, guys, he's like, unless you want me to project him to miss significant time, look at how many plays I have the Commanders running. And he's just like, I can't pull back on that. Like the play volume is going to be such a huge driver for why he's high on Jaden Daniels. And that's what Fitz mentioned. It's why he's high on Brian Robinson, because even if he's not the most efficient runner, the sheer volume of plays might lead to an extra check down here or an extra red zone opportunity there. And for a guy who's getting drafted in the 30s at the running back position, that volume could be really, really important for the Commanders.
Fitz, where are you drafting Robinson? At what point are you happy to take that swing?
Man, maybe late sixth. You don't really need to draft him much earlier than that.
Yeah. Is that about the same for you, Joe?
Yeah, he's more like 7th, 8th round, and that's why, like, look, if you go wide receiver heavy early, you can get a lot of these guys who we talked about on this program as somebody to be kind of an anchor to that sort of build, whether it's in the earlier rounds with an Isiah Pacheco or dipping into the later rounds with like a Brian Robinson or a Zach Moss or a Chase Brown, because like there are some questions to answer here. I think people view Brian Robinson as just a boring early down grinder. I think there were points last year where he showed he could be more than that. And the new offense, it should give him more opportunities.
We'll wrap up here in a second, Joe. Just last question. We did this for the rookies also. Was there anybody under any category that didn't get mentioned today that you feel at least we should say their name?
Oh, that's a really good question. Let me take a look right now at some of my most drafted players, and I will get right back to you. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to go to my exposure here on Underdog Fantasy. I already talked about Tyrone Tracy. So this is not going to be somebody who I would project to finish as an RB1, and that's why I didn't bring him up. But I was talking to Nathan Zagura of the Cleveland Browns. He's the color analyst for their radio broadcast, and he's a fantasy sports radio OG. And he said, I was asking about Nick Chubb's recovery, the fact that they didn't bring Kareem Hunt back. He said, if Nick Chubb does not lead the Cleveland Browns in rushing touchdowns, he thinks it's going to be Deontay Foreman and not Jerome Ford. So Deontay Foreman is a guy who's carrying like an RB60 ADP. He's actually one of my most drafted running backs. It's like that 5th or 6th running back on Best Ball right now, who's just at the end of my roster, who maybe in like, let's just say the 90th percentile outcome has a Gus Edwards kind of 13 touchdown season. I don't think that's going to happen. That's why he's RB60. But if Nick Chubb does not lead the Cleveland Browns in rushing touchdowns, that's who Nathan Zagura told me is going to do.
Fitz, same question. Can you give us as deep a cut as Deontay Foreman?
Yeah, I don't know if it's as deep a cut. You mentioned Blake Corum among the rookies. Like if anything happened to Kyrum, Blake Corum is just gold. Man, Jalen Warren, another one who could really benefit from an injury potentially, although Najee Harris has been pretty indestructible. I don't think he's missed a game in his first 3 seasons. But Warren, like DeVon Achane, was a rushing yards over expected all-star last season and just like really explosive, good in the passing game. So I like the talent a lot, but he would probably, like, we know Arthur Smith is going to use both backs. I mean, he kept his Rolls Royce in the garage last year far too often for the family sedan in Tyler Algier. So hopefully, hopefully Warren gets a lot of work this year, but it would probably take some sort of injury to Harris to give Warren RB1 potential.
All right, we'll get out of there on that. We gave everybody way more than a dozen names, so hopefully we hit on at least a few of these. I'm sure we will. Thank you again for making the time, Joe, and thank you, Fitz, for hopping on as well. We will see everybody again next time.